Good morning, Liberty. Good to see you guys. We're going to go ahead and be in Luke chapter 19. And then I'm going to pull in a parallel passage from Matthew. Captures the same moment, but highlights a couple different features about it. So we'll start with Luke 19. And when he had said these things, he went on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. And when he drew near to Bethpage in Bethany at the mount that is called Olivet, he sent two of the disciples, saying, "Go into the village in front of you, where on entering you will find a colt tied, on which no one has ever yet sat. Untie it and bring it here. And if anyone asks you why you are untying it, you shall say this: the Lord has need of it." So those who were sent went away and found it just as he had told them. And as they were untying the colt, its owners said to them, "Why are you untying the colt?" And they said, "The Lord has need of it." And they brought it to Jesus, and throwing their cloaks on the colt, they set Jesus on it. And as he rode along, they spread their cloaks on the road. And as he was drawing near, already on the way down the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of his disciples began to rejoice and praise God with a loud voice for all the mighty works they had seen, saying, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and on glory in the highest." Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." He answered, "I tell you, if these were silent, the very stones would cry out." And when he drew near and saw the city, he wept over it, saying, "Would that you, even you, had known on this day the things that make for peace. But now they are hidden from your eyes. For the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up a barricade around you and surround you and hem you in on every side, tear you down to the ground, you and your children within you. And they will not leave one stone upon another in you, because you did not know the time of your visitation." And he entered the temple and began to drive out those who sold, saying to them, "It is written, 'My house shall be a house of prayer,' but you have made it a den of robbers." And he was teaching daily in the temple. The chief priests and the scribes and the principal men of the people were seeking to destroy him, but they did not find anything they could do, for all the people were hanging on his words. Now, Matthew chapter 21 is a similar account that actually completes a little bit of the picture for us. Now, when they drew near to Jerusalem, this is 21 verse 1, and came to Bethpage, to the Mount of Olives, then Jesus sent two disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village in front of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. And if anyone says anything to you, you shall say, 'The Lord needs them,' and he will send them at once." This took place to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet, saying, "Say to the daughter of Zion, Behold, your king is coming to you, humbled and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden." And I'm going to drop down to verse 12. "And Jesus entered the temple and drove out all who sold and bought in the temple. And he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. He said to them, 'It is written, My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you make it a den of robbers.' And the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them." So I think that will give us a lot to work with this morning. But we are joining with churches all around the world that look back on this day that we call Palm Sunday, and it's the day that began the final week of Jesus' life. And most of us don't have the benefit of knowing what week is going to be the final week of our life, but Jesus did, and he knew that on this day he would be crossing a threshold that would set in motion the last events of his life and commit him to his death. And so, what makes Palm Sunday such a different day, such a special day? Well, it's really the day when Jesus made a very open and out loud entry into the city of Jerusalem. On this day, Jesus rode into Jerusalem in a manner that publicly proclaimed him as their long-awaited king. So he's been to the city before, but when he's been to the city before, it's always gone about things in a more veiled kind of way, a more down and low kind of way, but not today, not like this. This is different. This is when Jesus put himself out there in the open as the royal figure the scriptures had promised them. And you see there's a big parade that's going out on here, and you have the people in the parade that are exclaiming him as the ultimate heir to the Davidic throne. And they're using their outer clothing as like a royal runway for him, and they're waving palm branches, and they're hailing him as their king. This is not a subtle slipping in to the city of Jerusalem anymore. And that's really what sets this day apart. And for so many centuries, Jerusalem has been the city of kings before it got subjugated by Roman rule. But God promised in the Old Covenant scriptures that he would be raising up a king from the fallen line of David who would be what this nation needed and who would glorify it like never before and establish God's rule in the earth. And Jesus' actions here, guys, are announcing in no uncertain terms that he is that king that God is sending to them. And he knows what he's doing. He's riding right into the stronghold of those who want him dead. And the ruling class that controlled the city, that controlled the temple, are going to be very threatened by this. This will do nothing but further energize their desire and lead them to seek a way to end his life. But nevertheless, he's putting himself out there, and he is presenting himself as the king that God intended for them. And so what I want to do today is I just want to look at this passage and just ask the question, what do we see about Palm Sunday? The Palm Sunday presentation that makes this king so worthy of our reception. What is it that we see here highlighted for us that shows us why Jesus really is the king that we all need? So you can see from Matthew chapter 21, verse 4 and 5, that Jesus comes peacefully. It's the first thing. He comes peacefully. By sending his disciples on ahead of him to fetch this colt, and apparently Mama came along with the colt. This young donkey that had never been worked before, Jesus is deliberately orchestrating the fulfillment of a very Old Testament prophecy that predicted something about the peaceful way God's anointed king would come to them. That he would arrive gently in a lowly manner. A baby donkey is not an instrument of war. It's not part of the machinery of war. It's not what you ride into the heat of battle and go charge your enemies with. And that's how Jesus is not coming. He's not riding in on an iron chariot. He's not riding in on a painted, snorting war horse. But he's coming in on a baby donkey. Now, how fierce and fearsome is that? It's an animal that's associated with peace. And so even though this is a very out loud presentation of the king on this day, there's still a lowly manner to the presentation of the king on this day. God intends Jesus to be the Lord of our lives, but what Jesus will not do is lord himself over us. He's not coming to force his throne on the people this time and make them take him as their king through threats and violence and intimidation and all that kind of stuff. He's offering himself very differently than that, in a very humble way that's, I think, extremely easy to receive, but it's also very easy to reject. He's offering himself in a way where you can yield control of your life to him, but you can also keep control of your life. But liberty, that kind of gentleness has a way of arguing with our hearts that it's safe to open up to him and to let him establish his reign in your life. That if you are willing to trust him and make yourself vulnerable to him and give him the right of way to who you are, he's not going to do the wrong thing with that. This meekness that we see to his majesty speaks to us about the way that his rule will actually serve us and build us up and not break us down, and that it will give rest to our hearts, and he will be very peaceful. He will be very patient with his process in our lives. Number two, we see that Jesus comes with tears for the lost. Right? He weeps over Jerusalem. What a contrast. You have this crowd of people that are wildly cheering with joy and excitement, and yet you have Jesus just breaking down and sobbing as he sees the city, and you think, what is going on there? And so we see how our King holds a very tender heart for those that sadly exclude themselves from God's kingdom. You know, when somebody that we deeply love, that we deeply care about, rejects us, we tend to weep for ourselves. We tend to weep for our own woundedness, and it's not wrong that we do that, but Jesus is weeping for their loss because he sees a very spiritually lost city that refuses to be found, and it's almost like through Christ, God mourns for those who are missing out on his salvation and ultimately choosing condemnation over salvation. And this is like the one place that should not have missed this moment. This was the city of kings, the city where God has staged so much holy history in that city. This was the city that represented the hopes and dreams of the people, a city of God that was like the focal point of their spiritual heritage and emblematic of their identity as the Jewish people. And yet Jesus is seeing right through the temporary excitement of this moment and how things are going to really end, that the city of kings is going to reject the greatest king that God ever sent to them. That the city of God, ironically, will refuse God coming to them. And they will not have him as heaven's true authority in their lives. And so Jesus begins to weep for that tragic choice, and he weeps for the divine consequences that result from that tragic choice. He predicts prophetically what's in the future of this city and this devastating, depending on how you want to measure a generation, if you want to measure a generation by 40 years, Jerusalem is a generation away from the Roman general Titus laying siege to the city and ultimately wrecking it and massacring multitudes in it. And you know, it didn't have to be that way. Part of, I think, what's in those tears is the story of what could have been and isn't with these people. And Jesus says, this is happening. This is going to happen because you didn't recognize the time of your visitation when God came to you, when God was especially present with you in the person of his Son. This was heaven giving the very best heaven ever had to give, and you didn't see it for what it was, and you dismissed it. And make no mistake, not believing this king and not receiving this king ultimately is a destructive choice. This city will never be okay. This city is not going to be okay without Jesus, and we're not going to be okay without Jesus. Like, he holds the key to the well-being of this city. He holds the key to the flourishing of our humanity, and our humanity will never be healed of its sin-sick condition apart from this king. Jesus says, you don't know the things that make for peace. There was I don't mind telling you this because this individual didn't come here. He was from another surrounding region, not too far from here, but there was a woman who used to be a part of our church that wanted to connect me with someone that was in her life who was probably a decades-long alcoholic. And it was where it was now catching up to him. The health complications that had accrued over the years were beginning to put him into the hospital, and he was, I don't know how else to put it, he was perishing. And I remember talking with him on the phone, and eventually I met with him face to face, and I want to say a few months later he was dead. But I asked him on the phone, I said, what is it that you most want? And he said, peace. But alcohol is not where that's found. The UN is not where that's found. Some exciting new romantic relationship that lights up your life, that's ultimately not where it's found. A big savings account to face the future with is not where that's found. Jesus is our peace. He puts peace in us. He's our peace with God, and he breaks down the dividing walls of hostility that prevent peace between each other. All your wellness is with God's Son. So he comes with compassionate tears for the lost. Thirdly, he comes to cleanse. He purifies where there is compromise. Jesus went into the temple and he saw the way that they were using the worship of God to enrich themselves. And you have to kind of appreciate what's going on, right? We're in Passover season, so you're going to have pilgrims from all around the world that are pouring in here for the Passover festival. And of course, if you're coming from a long ways away, hundreds of miles away or whatever, it's too burdensome to start to try to haul your animal offerings with you, and you're going to just come and then buy the stuff of your sacrificial worship once you get there, which made for a very easy opportunity for predatory greed to get in there and take advantage of that vulnerability and those limited options and really overcharge people for those offerings. And sell those animals that they used in sacrificial worship for really rip-off rates and markup prices. And then on top of that, right, you had to exchange foreign currency for acceptable temple currency, so more opportunity for predatory greed to get in there and basically offer price gouging exchange rates. So they turned the temple worship into a big lucrative business opportunity. And Jesus hates that. But furthermore, that's not just the only thing that he's upset by. He's upset by the way they turned the temple court into a marketplace. So you're setting up shop right there in sacred space. And that hindered people's ability to meaningfully connect with their Creator. Like, this is where God is to be found. This is where he localized his presence in a very special and covenantal way. And you are throwing up an obstacle to people to be able to come into that space and meaningfully engage God and receive from God, right? I mean, how many of you, when you think, I just want to be still and know that he is God and have an opportunity to offer prayer to him and reflect upon him, and you know what I need? I just need to go to a noisy market full of livestock. Right? Like, that's like, take in the sounds and sights and smell. That's it's like, guys, you're junking up the worship here. And so Jesus looks at this interference and he cleanses it. He purifies where he sees this compromise. Now, Jesus ultimately makes a new temple out of us, doesn't he? He makes a new temple out of the church. And the way Jesus purifies the worship of the church is by purifying the worshiper. And I think it's worth asking, what are some of those interferences that we might be harboring in our lives that are harming a close connection with God, or in some way standing in the way of us having and knowing a better connection with God? Because we are God's sacred space. We are God's holy space. And are there things that are corrupting our worship, right? Are there dirty, sinful habits that we're not confessing, we're not dealing with them, we're not repenting of them? We've got these things in the basement of our lives that are dark and they're wrong, and we're still going down into them. Are we entertaining bitterness relationally toward others? Are we holding on to grudges and unforgiveness toward others? Are we listening to the wrong voices and believing lies about God, or believing lies about myself, so that what God says about me and what I say about me are like really far apart right now? Are we feeding on trashy forms of entertainment that are just dulling our sensitivity to the things of the Spirit? Are there wounds from our past that we're not courageously facing with Christ, and we're just keeping walls up around our heart? See, there are things that, as God's holy space, as God's sacred space, could be in our life that do interfere with worship. And this king comes to purify those. He wants to remove those with his cleansing love from our lives. Another thing that makes this king so right for us is that he is a king of truth. Verse 47. And he was teaching daily in the temple. And the chief priests and the scribes and the principal men of the people were seeking to destroy him, but they did not find anything they could do. I love this phrase, for all the people were hanging on his words. The rulers of the earth are not known for truthful lips. Politicians are not known for trustworthy words. Politicians are known for evasive answers, bald-faced denials, and propaganda, and spin, and PR, and half-truths. I've been reading a biography about a girl that grew up in North Korea and escaped it. And the kinds of things that the people were expected to believe and confess about the dynasty that they did life under are absolutely laughable. And yet for them, it was life and death if they didn't confess it and believe it. But this is a very different leader. You can hang your whole life on every one of Jesus' words. Those words, like you can literally do what they're doing. You can hang everything about you on his words. Those words are just what your heart needs. Those words will never lead you astray. They will, as John said this morning, they will water your thirsty soul. Because everything Jesus has to say to us is what God gave him to say to us. And he is how God is speaking to the world. And by those words, our lives are made whole, and our steps and our mindsets get rightly ordered before God. So he's a truth-giving king. And lastly, and this is why I wanted to pull in a little bit of Luke. You'll notice in Luke that there's another feature to this king, and that he's a king for the least of these. He's a king for the least of these. It says that after Jesus purified the temple, that it was the blind and the lame that drew near to him and received from him. And those are the type of people that are not used to being noticed. Those are the type of people that were probably very used to being on the sidelines or being ignored or looked at condescendingly. But not by Christ. In Christ, they had a king who welcomed them, who spent time with them, and did not resent the needs and the problems and the burdens that they carried. And they could come to this king and they could get blessing from this king too. Liberty, our king is a lover of the lowly. He is a king for the least of these. What other king is like the Palm Sunday king? A king for the least of these, king of truth, a king who purifies where there is compromise, a king who sheds compassionate tears for the lost, and a king who offers himself to us humbly and peacefully. Hail him, salute him, bow low before him. That wouldn't be a bad idea. But better yet, enthrone him. Because that's what this day was about. Are you going to take him as your king, or are you not going to take him as your king? Jesus wants to reign. He wants to reign in our thought life. He wants to reign in our practices. He wants to reign in our perspectives. He wants to reign in how we look at life and how we see the world. He wants to reign in our choices, how we treat other people. He wants to be the Lord of our sexuality. He wants to be the Lord of our finances. Like God does intend for Jesus to take reign in and over our lives. But it's in surrendering control that we discover what Jerusalem missed out on that day, and that is the things that make for peace. It's in receiving his reign you get the best version of you that there could ever be.